Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Brand 2020. Today is November 18th, 2016. With the new administration of Donald Trump getting prepared for taking over the White House, there is a lot of uncertainty and perhaps even trepidation about the intelligentsia that will support him with regard to U.S. Japan relations. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Nancy Snow, once again. Nancy, thank you very much. And Gerald Curtis is joining us here to give us insight into what his views are on the generation of Japan hands and the maybe the lack of Japan hands in the current transition team. I don't know. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, as far as I know, there are no so-called Japan hands on the transition team. Even more worrisome is that so-called Japan hands are people who are really well informed on Japan, whether it be in academia or in think tanks. It's a really dwindling, almost disappearing
It sure has
group.
become a smaller group, hasn't it?
It's just terrible, and American social science departments, American academia, has become so anti-so-called area studies that the incentives for people to spend the time, invest the time and the energy to learn the language and learn about Japan is a big problem. So it's very worrisome. And of course, if it had been a Hillary Clinton administration, we know who the Asia team would have been. It's people who worked with her when she was Secretary of State. A lot of very experienced people. But on the on the Trump side, so far, no senior people who are really well informed have surfaced. But I wouldn't overstate the problem in that when the government gets going, day-to-day relations with Japan are going to be handled by the State Department and by the Pentagon, in which there are lots of Japan people, so-called Japan hands. People know a lot about this country. They would serve whoever the president is. But, at the top level, you need people who are well-informed. There are a few people are close to Trump who've had a lot of business engagement with Japan. That's good, but it is worrisome that it's a concern that the pool of Japan scholars is getting smaller and smaller.
The more worrying thing for me is that he actually made a statement that we're going to eliminate all of the lobbyists, all of the guys who are really deep in the pockets of the Democratic administration and take those guys out. Nancy, you've got a view on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what this has to do with Brand 2020, but anyway,
Okay.
My perspective is a little different here. I was interested in looking at redefining what we mean by Japan hands. We have this sort of elite top-down perspective that is so common throughout Japan. So even at the conference the other day, Dr. Curtis was the most refreshing speaker because there were a lot of speakers there. They all know each other, but they're all part of this tight club.
Right.
And so the elites talk to the other elites at the same time that the Trump election had to do with a repudiation of elitism and globalization, which is associated with elitism. So if anything else, I would have a democratization of Asia studies and Japan studies or Northeast Asia.
The point you're making here is bigger than this Japan studies or Japan has point. The point is that people who are involved either in the management of foreign relations, people in government, or people who are involved in policy process in one way or another, commentators, analysts, operatives, they talk to each other, to their counterparts on the other side of the ocean. And there's nothing more boring, in my view, than a conference between American and Japan specialists on U.S. Japan relations. Because you can write the script for what they're going to say well before the meeting ever takes place. It just amazes me that people can keep on going to these meetings, say the same thing, whether U.S. Japan, and then what to do about North Korea. Oh my God, it's the same story over and over and over again. But what's missing here is we in the U.S. are not explaining to the public why should they care? Why should they care about U.S.-Japan relations? Or why is globalization in their interest?
Right.
This view that globalization is great for American business, but it's really bad for the American working man. That is becoming so deeply felt. And the only way to deal with that is to confront it and say, no, globalization, being part of the global economy, is absolutely critical for our country, including for you. The problem is that globalization has dislocating effects. People lose jobs. And where we have failed as a country is to help those people get the skills they need to have something higher paying job, help them relocate to a different part of the country where they could find a good job. We leave them at the mercy
Sure do.
of
Right.
these forces of globalization. No wonder that people say, enough of that. Let's get Donald Trump in here and protect us. That's why Hillary Clinton lost in the so-called Rust Belt cities of the Midwest, where companies have moved out to Mexico, China, their production to Mexico and China and elsewhere. Although the major reason for the dislocation is not moving to these other countries. That's really technological change. Technology has deprived a lot of people of jobs.
Right.
But anyway, the point.
And tax policy.
And tax policy. So the point here that I think Nancy is making, that I would underscore, is whether it be in the U.S. or be in Japan, the leaders have to do two things. First, they got to listen to the people who elect them about what their concerns are. And my beef, I've been a lifelong Democrat, but I am so furious with the Democratic Party. The way it's going to continue to shrink. You know, there are 50 states, 36 of the governors are Republicans. Only 16 are Democrats. There are 99 state legislators, 69 of them have Republican majorities. The Republicans are expanding their base at the state, local level, and the Democratic Party is shrinking to a party that is represented mainly in Massachusetts, California, and New York, and a few other states. The middle of the country is all red. Amazes me and frustrates me and angers me that after this election, Hillary Clinton blames FBI director for having lost the election. Democratic leaders say, well, there's still a lot of misogyny. We don't want to vote for a woman to be president. They even amazingly accuse the media of being unfair when the media has been really unfair to Trump, not to Clinton. And today's paper had Nancy Pelosi, who's now has a challenge to be as speaker. She's going to win, but saying we can't take full responsibility for what happened because it happened because of forces beyond our control. Give me a break.
Russians.
Give me Russians, or that half the country is racist, or whatever. It's a basket of deplorables who voted for Trump. No, what happened in this election was people did not want to vote for the Democrats, for this elitism, for these people who live in a bubble of privilege and wealth on the East Coast and don't know what's going on in the country. I mean, I grew up in a household. My father was a working man, and what he believed in was Franklin Roosevelt, the Democratic Party, and unions. And that was what the Democratic Party used to be. Right. Union movement has, weakened tremendously.
What's a working man?
A working man.
Oh, a working man.
Yeah, working.
Okay.
Blue collar or a working, person.
People that Studs Terkel would talk to, right?
Anyway, this used to be the base of the Democratic Party. But you look at these young people, Clinton's campaign manager, 36-year-old fellow, I bet he's never been in a working class community in his life.
Right.
And it's all about multiculturalism and representing minorities. Yeah, I'm all for that. But the white working class has to be part of a multicultural society as well. So it just annoys, it just angers me because it frustrates me because if the Democratic Party doesn't reflect on why it didn't win, it's their fault. So it really angers me that you don't have Democratic Party leaders saying, this is our problem. It's always somebody else's problem. They'll blame anybody and everybody for what happened, but not themselves.
Right.
But and I would go back to that point. I love what he's saying, except he really did connect well with the people, and a lot of the people there, it turned out that some of them had higher income, interestingly, some with higher education. They still felt like the forgotten, and part of it has to do with this decline in trust in social institutions, including the media, government, non-governmental.
Banks.
Business, yes, is in decline too. But interestingly, if you're a CEO, sometimes you have greater trust in a CEO. So Trump said, I can't be bought. He did 13 rallies in 2 days. He ended his last rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, near where I grew up as a kid. I watched it to the bitter end. It was 1 a.m, and I thought, he might just pull this off.
I got it. I think that's so true. And what struck me in the last days of the campaign is Trump is out there having these rallies with large numbers, thousands of people. And what is Hillary doing in the last day of the campaign? In Florida and elsewhere, she has Beyonce, Bruce Springsteen, Jay-Z, Katy Perry up there on the stage, and she's having a great time. If you're in some rural community, or you're in a town in Wisconsin,
or if you're in Tokyo, Japan, like me.
Yeah. If you're in a place where you're unhappy with the state of affairs in the United States, and you turn on your TV,
it causes dissonance.
What does it mean?
It sure does.
What's the message? The message is she lives in a world I will never experience, and she's having a ball. And she spends days out there in Southampton with the hedge fund owners and others, raising a lot of money for slick TV commercials. And what is Trump doing? He's up in the middle of the night sending out Twitter messages, which then the media picks up the following morning. He got lots of free advertising. Anyway, I'm very unhappy that Trump won, but maybe it's the cold shower the East Coast elite needed to have to wake up and reconnect with the people. But so far, the evidence that they are getting it is not there.
Right. It was a tectonic change, not just for the Democratic Party. I mean, the Republicans, too, also suffered, and they're probably having the same issues to decide internally now, what do we represent? Who are our constituencies?
Well, I mean, that's really fascinating because the party, I mean, Trump hijacked the Republican Party. This is like a third-party candidate who grabbed a hold because of the primary system.
I like this part, I don't like that part.
Grabbed the machinery of the Republican Party, used it, became president. Now, but because he did, the Republicans did amazingly well in this election. They maintained their majority in the Senate. They only lost 6 seats in the House. They got the presidency.
And he's going to stick with his speaker.
But you can say Make America Great Again is so simple, and a lot of people criticize that. But when you have a simple slogan, I know from propaganda research, you can add whatever ending you want to. So you say Make America Great Again for me, for my family, for my home, for my community. I live part-time in Syracuse, New York. You talk about the loss of manufacturing.
That's right.
So a lot of people, higher percentage of people on welfare, and their stories were not being shared. Hillary Clinton never really gave anyone a reason to vote for her other than not to vote for that guy. Look at him. Look at the contrast. But he did give people a hook. And he was much more effective, even in some of the ads. One of the anti-Trump ads showed him on Air Force One, showed him in the White House, and it put the idea in people's heads that he could indeed be the president. And when you do that, it becomes sort of like a virus of the mind, and it got people believing, why not have a billionaire?
Well, I think, though...
a virus of the mind, that's beautiful.
I think if Joe Biden had decided to run in this election, he would have won very handedly. But he's maybe the only one of the Democratic Party leaders who, when he talks, blue-collar workers, Black, African Americans, Hispanics, whatever their race or ethnic background may be,
they relate.
They feel some authenticity.
And you know why? In part because Joe Biden is famous for making some faux pas, right? Foot in mouth. And that actually makes you more approachable.
That's right.
Does it?
It does. It does. You don't want to be perfection. And I think Hillary Clinton may be doing that now because her latest speech in Washington, she really downplayed her looks.
So no makeup?
Right.
So the best campaign speech, the only really good campaign speech The only good speech she made during the campaign was her concession speech.
Yes,
You bet.
it was
That
huge.
concession speech, here was a human being in pain, sharing her real feelings with, finally, that artificial smile,
Right.
the overscripted, rhetoric she used. No, who can relate?
Well, she just wrote it maybe 15, 20 minutes earlier. I mean, this
this-
had to have come out
yeah.
of
And
the heart.
but to his point, it was the best election money couldn't buy. In the end, Trump didn't really need to spend as much money because he now on Twitter has over 14 million. She's still hovering at 11 million. So he had that direct communication,
Yeah.
and then he earned a lot of free media coverage. So
Yes.
the press went light on him originally because he was just a buffoon to them. He was an
That's right.
entertainer.
That's right.
So he really banked on that, and then she had all the focus grouping and all the manufacturing, and it came across as really phony.
Very
So the
true.
lesson here in public diplomacy and nation branding and place branding is go for the genuine, tell your story, warts and all sometimes.
Right.
You know, when she was Secretary of State, she called the TPP the gold standard for international trade agreements. Then she came out against it because there's a lot of anti-globalization sentiment, a lot of anti-TPP sentiment. Do you think it bought her even one vote? No, because Americans looking at them says, Trump really believes, he's really against it. Bernie Sanders, he's really against it. But Hillary Clinton, she's only saying she's against it, but we know that at heart she is a traditional free trade person. She would have been much better off if she had said, we need to have TPP. We need international trade agreements on a multilateral basis.
And taking the heat for it.
But we need to have programs to help people who are hurt. This is why globalization is important for everybody in this country. But this is what we have failed to do. And if I become president, this is what I will do to deal with this problem. Then she could have won this election.
Right. The Japanese kind of shore up that argument in, for example, TPP by taking the farmers and helping re-educate them, getting them into other industries, and they've spent a lot of time doing that, and I think that's how the Prime Minister was able to get TPP more acceptable through the JA, for example.
I agree.
Japanese government, though, has not done a very effective job internally in explaining TPP to the domestic population. And back to his point about the need for more public education, why we need U.S. Japan to be strong.
Let's talk about that. You mentioned an event that you and Dr. Curtis were at on Tuesday of last week. Can we talk a little bit about that and this
It was
tremendous
this
legacy?
week. It was
week.
where
I'm sorry,
Prime
just
Minister
4 days
Abe
ago.
spoke.
Tremendous legacy that
Yeah.
was given to us, partially, maybe majorly, by Shintaro Abe, and you were a key influencer in that too.
Well, I was involved in setting up of this Center on Global Partnership. Abe.
The Abe Fellows, right?
Yeah, the Abe Fellowship and
Huge.
the CGP. So this was the 25th anniversary. But Shintaro Abe had the idea, but then he had cancer. He got very ill. So in 1991, he sort of asked Takeshita to please take care of this, and so I spent a lot of time with Prime Minister Takeshita talking about structure, and he's the one who got the LDP and the bureaucracy, the finance ministry, to come up with the money, and then he came up with the idea of having it named for Shintaro. And yesterday, the day before yesterday, on Tuesday, in his remarks at the reception, Abe mentioned Takeshita by name and how the role he played in making this happen for his father. So, and then I was on the advisory board for the first decade of the CG. But it's been a very important organization. But the Center for Global Partnership annual budget, there's an endowment, but because of what's happened to interest rates and so on, the budget for the CGP now is less than 1/7 of what it was in the 1990s, when we need it more than ever.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that maybe the Japanese government will give it another big.
Well, that
it's a
was the
wellspring.
purpose of the Abe Fellowship in part. I of course, I had a 12-month Abe
Yeah, but-
Fellowship, But I think every recipient, we're getting monies from the Japanese people. And so that's what made me move to Japan, actually, and put roots down here, because I think that we really owe it to the Japanese people to not only have more collaborative research, but to help to internationalize Japan and maybe bring more attention to the Center for Global Partnership and what the Japan Foundation does so they can get more funding. This was our problem when I worked at the U.S. Information Agency, which, by the way, was the agency overseeing the Abe Fellowships in the 90s. So I heard about what I called the Abe Fellowships because I didn't know any better, and I got corrected about that.
Oh, the Abe Fellowship.
Right. I mean, it's always Abe Lincoln. Yeah. But now, as an Abe Fellow alumna, I'm really committed to doing that. And I'm glad you shared about that decline in the budget, because we were always having to do that at USIA.
Right. The creation and fostering of Japan Hands in the Trump administration, it's something that we're going to carefully watch. Please stay tuned.